What if the current period of solitude is not punitive, but preparatory? What if the feeling of loneliness is not rejection, but a deliberate selection? What if God is divesting you of comfort in anticipation of something greater? Consider the examples of Moses, isolated for 40 years in the wilderness prior to leading Israel; Joseph, confined to a pit and prison before governing Egypt; David, pursued and hidden in caves before his ascension to kingship; and Jesus, led by the Spirit into the wilderness before performing his most significant miracles. A consistent pattern emerges. Divine isolation precedes the release of blessings. Separation precedes breakthrough. A period of adversity precedes triumph. You, too, may currently be experiencing this phase. Throughout history, a recurring divine process unfolds prior to the emergence of greatness. Isolation is not accidental or coincidental. It is a necessary prerequisite. Moses spent 4 decades in the wilderness before receiving divine communication. Joseph was cast into a pit before being elevated power. David was chosen as king, but was forced to conceal himself in caves before assuming the throne. Jesus was led into the wilderness before performing his most significant miracles. This pattern exists because preparation must precede blessing, and transformation must precede elevation. Joseph, at the young age of 17, possessed ambitious dreams. However, these aspirations came at a cost. His own brothers, who should have protected him, betrayed him, casting him into a pit, selling him into slavery, and leaving him for dead. Even after finding a way to survive, he faced further adversity, false accusations, imprisonment in a foreign land. The despair and loneliness must have been overwhelming, prompting questions of divine abandonment. However, God was working behind the scenes. Joseph's isolation was strategically positioning him for a greater purpose. Ultimately, he not only survived but thrived, attaining a position of leadership. As Genesis 50 verse 20 states, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Therefore, periods of solitude should be viewed as opportunities for training, not punishment. Moses possessed considerable power, wealth, and influence as a prince of Egypt. However, this status was abruptly lost following a single mistake, transforming him into a fugitive. He transitioned from a palace to the desert. The ensuing silence must have been profound, as he spent his days tending sheep, a stark contrast to his former life. This was necessary because, to lead God's people, Moses needed to shed the arrogance, pride, and distractions acquired in Egypt. Only after 40 years of isolation did God reveal himself through the burning bush, promising, "I will be with you." Exodus 3 verse 12. God often divests individuals of their existing circumstances before calling them to something greater. David was anointed king, but did not immediately assume the throne. Instead, he was relentlessly pursued, forced to flee and seek refuge in caves. The fear and loneliness must have been intense, leading him to question his divine selection amidst such suffering. However, the throne demands resilience. Every trial, betrayal, and lonely night in the cave contributed to shaping and strengthening him. As Psalm 27 verse 14 advises, "Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage." Divine isolation serves to cultivate resilience. Elijah had just witnessed a remarkable display of divine power, with fire descending from heaven. Yet, moments later, he was fleeing for his life, consumed by fear and loneliness. He sought refuge in a cave, questioning everything. However, God was not present in the earthquake or the fire. Instead, he communicated through a whisper. As 1 Kings 19 verse 12 recounts, "After the earthquake a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice." Sometimes, it is in the silence that one can hear God most clearly. Jesus, the embodiment of God, was deliberately led by the Spirit into the wilderness, devoid of crowds and followers, experiencing hunger, solitude, and temptation. This was necessary because preparation must precede power, and testing must precede miracles. As Luke 4 verse 14 states, Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit. Reasons for divine isolation prior to blessing. Elimination of distractions. Clear communication with God requires solitude. Development of strength and endurance. Character is essential for sustaining blessings. Refinement and purification. Like gold, purification requires a fiery process. Separation from detrimental influences. Not everyone can accompany you on your divine journey. Strategic positioning for the opportune moment. Timing is paramount in God's plan. Trust the process, remembering the examples of Joseph, Moses, David, and Jesus. Remain faithful, resisting doubt amidst the silence. Focus on preparation rather than complaint, recognizing this period as a training ground rather than a punishment. Maintain focus on the ultimate blessing, knowing that the season of isolation will eventually culminate in triumph. The wilderness is not a permanent state, and the pit is not your final destination. The silence does not signify God's absence, but rather his preparation. Persevere, understanding that elevation follows isolation. The blessing is forthcoming, and in its arrival, you will comprehend the necessity of your initial separation. If this message resonates with you, consider sharing it with someone who may benefit from it. To receive more such messages, subscribe to this channel, enable notifications, and join us on this journey of faith, purpose, and divine elevation. Your breakthrough is on the horizon. Stay connected.